Welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. I am glad to be with you today. It has been a long week, and I'm recording this on the Wednesday, just 6 days after Charlie Kirk has been killed. As I said in the last episode, I'm not going to go into Charlie Kirk. I didn't know much about Charlie Kirk. What I saw, I wasn't a fan of. I didn't feel like it rose to the level of discourse that I like, but I did appreciate that he engaged with people. I was totally ignorant of the fact that Charlie Kirk was like so passionate about Christianity and his faith. That was pretty surprising to me. I've also been really surprised at the amount of people who watched him, who engaged in that, and engaged in watching his show, and how many seeds I think he planted. Our church was absolutely packed this past week. And I saw from a lot of people on Facebook that their church was packed. It's very similar to September 11th. My own faith journey, I became a Christian in November of 2001. I'd been an atheist. I remember going to Billy Graham in 1996 and just thinking it was the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. These people are all so weak-minded. What a bunch of fools. Just your typical atheist, late 90s high school kid. Had a lot of personal trials. You can go back and listen to the leading Adam episode if you really want the whole, like, more of the story. But 9/11 really softened my heart for Jesus, because it was, I think when you grow up in suburban America, you live in an environment that is constructed to be secure, constructed to be safe, right? And the political structure in a suburban area is all geared towards safety. Maybe not all geared towards safety, but it's a high value. It's a high priority, right? Where I live in the city, like, safety is a priority, but it's not achievable in a city of 1 million people. And so I live in downtown Indianapolis, basically. September 11th pierced that. Oh, and I don't know why it pierced it, because the reality is, like, planes weren't flying into Plainfield High School. They were flying into New York City at high-value targets, but it just made me feel so unsafe and so insecure. And that feeling, I think, led to a lot of bad decisions in terms of foreign policy, which is why I'm really skeptical to see something that makes people feel insecure and then let's create a bunch of policy like free speech codes that then give us this false sense of security. But I remember going to church on September 12th, and I went to church the following Sunday. And the reason is that I was looking for, when you aren't religious and you're secular, you're searching for your own moral code. You're trying to construct your own worldview. And I think if you're a teenager trying to do that, it's darn near impossible, because you have no wisdom. You have no real mentorship in this day and age. And everything was collapsing in on me. And my nuclear and extended family was crumbling. My relationship with my girlfriend had ended. Now society is crumbling. Like, help, I'm in trouble. Where do I go? So I went to church. I see in a lot of younger people on my feed a very similar reaction to this. Suburban people who had a sense of security, who feel like there's a bit of an instability. Maybe their worldview is shaky. The structure of their moral code is shaky. And when their personal safety feels threatened, even if it may not actually be threatened, if you see every single day that they're after you, it moves a lot of people to church. I'm not going to pick all that apart, right? But I think we just need to identify that's part of what this response is. It's that feeling of watching somebody get shot in the throat that, while I did not watch Charlie Kirk really ever, if you did, you feel that parasocial relationship with a podcaster. I've talked about this forever. People who listen to my show, watch my podcasts, I'll meet them on the street and they know my kids. They know where I live. They know about me. They know what they like and don't like about me. They have more information about my personality, life, context than, and I don't know their name. And so that one-way relationship is called the parasocial relationship. And podcasting builds an intimacy between an audience and a podcaster in a way that only radio does. Audio just seems to do something that video, written form doesn't do as effectively. I tend to think that's because if you're a podcaster, you are probably listening to me while you're doing the dishes, walking the dog, taking a shower, driving your car. Your brain's not in task mode, so you're disengaged, so you're able to absorb the information in a different way. And so I think your brain allows you to build more of a connection with the person you're listening to than maybe you would if you're like watching a 30-second TikTok from a stranger. So I think that also is part of the reaction to some of this. Not to mention violence always backfires. It never works. If you see violent solutions to solving your problem and you carry that out, you're going to make that person's podcast the number one podcast. People are going to eulogize the victim with hagiography as opposed to the grays of a person's personality. It just becomes very flat. All good, all bad. Let's debate this. That's like the reason, not to mention the destruction of the human life, a human's life, but like your outcome is the complete opposite of your intention. Like it just makes no sense why anybody would use violence to solve a political problem. But I've just seen this rush to church and a vocalization of I have been weak in my faith in both my inbox, in conversations with people, and then also online from friend circles. And I think it's, one, awesome that you're realizing that. Two, you should be courageous in your faith. I have not always been. Part of the story of this podcast is that I become a Christian in 2001. I get baptized in 2005. And between those points, I'm a zealot. And then, like, I just start drifting. It's like the day after my baptism, the light switch just gets turned off. End up getting married, have not a great marriage. We divorced on our third anniversary. It was a biblical divorce. And I just went crazy and acted in a way that, like, I was deeply ashamed of now. I didn't kill anybody or anything, right? But if your standard is God's view of morality, I was not living that life. And I think if you've listened to this podcast from 2012 when I was married to now, to 2025, and there are a few of you who have listened to this podcast that long, like you've heard the shades of my conversation. I never was not a Christian. I had a supernatural experience when I was saved on that night in November in 2001 that has left me to never doubt the existence of Jesus. I've never once doubted the existence of God from that experience. But I didn't always fully embrace that as a lifestyle in my heart. Christians would say he saved my life, but he wasn't the Lord of my life. I wasn't living out those values. And in 2018, I just was miserable, like from just constant, like looking for meaning in trying to find a relationship, to be honest. I wanted to reconstitute what had been lost from my divorce. And I just decided to give that all up. I'm not going to date. I'm going to be celibate. Like, I'm just going to not live the kind of dating lifestyle that is typical of people in their 30s in 2018. And so a big part of that was realizing, like, I'm a Christian, but I never say that on my own podcast. And that's because I'm so embarrassed by how I act. Like, the problem is not God or Christianity, it's me. Like, I'm the embarrassment. So it's been a long process, and I am nowhere near perfect in any way, shape, or form. But I have a great marriage now, great kids, great family. I do a lot differently now than I did even in 2018. But the first step of that is to realize that you're lukewarm. Like, if you're going to believe something, why wouldn't you actually go all in on it, right? What's the point of being a Christian, a Muslim, like whatever, right? This is what I don't understand about my past self. It's like, why say you're this if you're not saying it because you're trying to get favor with any kind of community? Because I had no Christian community whatsoever. I had this I had no real relationship with anyone in a church. Went to a mega church if I went to church. I had no relationship. I'd never met the pastor of the church that I went to. I didn't have Christian friends. I didn't pray, didn't read my Bible, didn't do anything spiritual. So what's the point of even saying you're a Christian, right? And this is something that I saw recently. Like, you're going to spend all of eternity with Jesus. If you are a Christian, you believe that when you die, Jesus has saved you from your sins. You will not be judged for those sins, and you will not be separated from God in the afterlife. You will spend all of eternity with Jesus. So if you believe that, why wouldn't you spend time with Jesus now? Why wouldn't you read your Bible? Why wouldn't you pray? Why wouldn't you go to church? Why wouldn't you be in a small group? And because do you really want to go to eternity and be with Jesus if you don't want to do that now? So I really viewed my Christianity as like a sort of loose set of morals, a bit of a moral foundation, even really until like a couple years ago. When you get married, you can no longer be the individual that you were. Okay? I lived alone for 8 years. I loved it. Like, I'm an introvert. I like peace and quiet. I like doing what I want to do when I want to do it. I'm a very selfish person. I still get resentful if I'm asked what time I'm going to be home, even though it's a perfectly valid question. It's like part of the way I was raised and part of being a libertarian. I'm like, I'll do me and you do you and we'll be fine. But I recognized, man, that's how my first marriage got to where it got. And I had to really start changing so much about my life. And I had to start facing the things in my life that have been really serious struggles. First is my weight. Like, you can see that, okay? And my health and food. And I'm always going to be struggling with that. Like, I struggle with it every single day. And the second is money. I spend money to make myself feel better. Mainly, especially books. Like, I love books. I've got to start doing like book reviews on this podcast to make it all worth it to have all these books. And like, I was spending in ways that were very selfish. And it's like, it just got to a point where it's like, hey, are we going to do this marriage? My wife's like, are we going to do this marriage? And it's said it much more sternly than this. But are we going to do this marriage right? Or are we going to do this marriage wrong? And I had to start fixing the things that I know were deep sins in my life and deep struggles. And I had to start digging in. Like, it's not enough to just listen to a sermon once a week on a podcast, but this is a daily fight. It's a daily fight to not get super mad at somebody for something that they said to you. It's a daily fight to not want to just be lazy that day. It's a daily fight to confront whatever sin you have. I always get confused by Christians who spend a lot of time talking and thinking about other people's sins and the structural sins of society. And it's like, man, I am so overwhelmed with the BS that I'm perpetrating on myself, my family, the people around me, that how do you have time? So let's get to the point. I almost daily have a set of routines that attend to my spiritual life. Okay. And sometimes I'm really good at this. Sometimes I'm really bad. But I think it's helpful that if you're in the place that I was in 2001, where you don't know where to begin, or 2018, where you believe, but you're not like all in, or 2023, where you're like, I'm in, but I'm not practicing the way of Jesus. Like, how do I get there? So I'm just going to give you like a few pieces of, I'm going to give you resources. My thing is, and I don't know if you've picked this up about my Facebook page or my writing or this podcast, it's I want to talk about where the rubber meets the road. What are you going to do about this? Like, how do you be civil in conversations that are really difficult? Like, I can sit here and say the left is violent and evil and doing all this, and Trump and the right are doing all that. There's a million people doing that kind of stuff, but like, how do you actually put some of these things into action? And the first is like, you've got to read. No, the first is you have to make a decision, right? Are you going to keep doing what you're doing and living the way that you're living and feeling the way that you feel and avoiding what you know you need to do and just living miserably? Or are you going to start chasing wisdom? Are you going to start doing some things differently? Are you going to start seeking out help to solve the problems in your life that you know you have? And so if you're curious about Jesus, like the thing that helped me was just like, my mom had taken us to the Methodist church. I didn't like going. We went real infrequently, but I started just going to learn, not to make a commitment, but that started on September 11th to September 12th, 2001. Let me just go check what this is, because I know whatever's going on is not working. And so let me go and see if there's something here. Start church shopping. I bet I went to 50 different churches before I ended up at a place called Mount Pleasant on the south side, where I went for 15 years. Great, awesome church. The first is just go find people in person that are Christians and ask them your questions. There isn't a Christian alive who's an actual Christian who's going to be asked a question by somebody who is trying to seek out answers and not be excited to answer that question. Like, they're going to be they're like, this is my chance. I'm so happy you're here. Let's talk. And it's the parable of the prodigal son in the Bible, where Jesus talks about the son demands his inheritance from his father. He goes out, he blows the inheritance after years of rolling around with pigs and just living in a wild way, while his brother, is there as like the good son who's taking care of all of it. And the prodigal son comes back from rolling in the mud with the pigs, and the father runs out to greet him, hugging, crying, excited, throws him a giant party. And the other brother is, what are you doing? Why are you here? I'm the one, blah, 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 blah. Christians are always going to be the father. They're never, and if they are the brother, then they are not the ones you need to talk to. It's 1,000 to 1, I promise you. So if you've got questions and you're a Christian in your life, you just got to start asking questions. Don't ask ChatGPT because you're embarrassed. You've got to just engage people. Get over your pride and just start engaging people with your questions. The second is a book called The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. I never doubted the existence of God, but I am a questioning person. And that is like a great gateway drug to a bunch of archaeological evidence, scriptural, manuscript evidence, I should say, in a great story format. And it's super easy to read. There's a movie. The movie's fine. Watch the movie, but that's not going to have the same effect as like reading a book. The audiobook is fine, but I just really think you need to sit down and read a paper book. If you don't know where to start with the Bible, don't start with Genesis. Okay, start with John. Okay, it's a very readable introduction to Jesus. And then read Romans, which is a little bit more difficult, but it's a great explanation of what Christians believe. And then go back to Genesis and start there. Okay, or read through the New Testament and then go back to Genesis. You probably have an old Bible that some family member that cares about you, that could probably be the person you could ask questions of. And that's helpful, but sometimes if you get a study Bible, like the ESV Study Bible, or the Life Application Study Bible, or the Zondervan Study Bible, these are really helpful with the little notes in the bottom that can help you figure out the whole story. And there's so much to learn. It's like people spend their entire lives like a Martin Luther or John Calvin, these great theologians, and they die not knowing a little. They just know such a small amount of what they think they need to know. So start there. If you are at the 2018, I have made a commitment, but now I'm lukewarm phase, what you need to do is get actively engaged in your church. You have to make a series of commitments with yourself. You know what your sins are. You know what you shouldn't be doing. You know you shouldn't be watching porn, and you know you're struggling with it. You just are lukewarm because you don't want to give it up. You have to start having a hard series of conversations about the things that you don't want to give up, right? You're going to need to be in a church talking with people about those things. I feel like maybe that's like jumping ahead. Okay, let me go back. All right, let me not scare you. All right, let's go back to that 2018. I'm lukewarm. I need to make a commitment. You need to make a series of agreements with yourself. Okay, that's what I would do. Write out a series of agreements with yourself. I commit to going to church once a week. If I don't have a church, I'm going to go to the church that I am most familiar with this Sunday. And I'm going to go for 4 weeks straight. And if I'm not feeling it, because I didn't like it last time, I'm going to keep going to churches until I find the one that I connect with. And that next commitment is that you're never going to leave that church. Okay? The problem with the whole thing with Mark Driscoll tweeting out, if your pastor didn't talk about Charlie Kirk this weekend, you need to leave that church. That is BS. Part of the reason we are in the situation we are in is that people treat relationships, church relationships, marriages, friendships, with a transient, transactional view of them. And the relationship that you have with your church is covenantal. The relationship that you have with your spouse is covenantal. The relationship you have with your family is covenantal. There should be friends in your life that you have covenantal friendships with, that you have made agreements with them explicitly, that I will do these things, you will do these things, and when we violate the terms of those things, we have a way to discuss how we get back to where we need to be. But we never give up on each other. There should be a group of friends in your life that you are never going to give up on. Oh, we disagree on this. They said this about me. They talk behind my back. Like, man up and have a conversation with them. But quit giving up on each other. Quit giving up on your relationships. Quit giving up on your husband, your wife, your kids, your mom, your dad, for all these reasons that culture gives you, that you have permission to give up on everybody. And then you turn 40 and you can't figure out why you're so lonely and miserable. Because you've been given by permission given permission by people who have dysfunctional relationships to do what they do. And so you have to have a series of commitments in your life. I'm going to go to church. I'm going to find one that I really like the people. Maybe the preaching's boring. Maybe there's no fog machine. Maybe there's great music, but bad preaching, and then it's not like you're listening to Billy Graham every Sunday. Right? It needs to be biblical teaching, right? I go to what's called a PCA church. There's a bunch of denominations. This is a Presbyterian denomination that is smaller. It is not a mainline denomination. It's a more conservative denomination, but it is a liberal congregation in the conservative denomination. And so it's that tension that I love, right? Probably half the people I go to church with or more are Kamala voters, and then maybe a third are Trump voters, and then another third of I don't care, or we're the Libertarians in the group. It shouldn't be a political church. I just slipped into a Baptist preacher. Jesus should be mentioned. I was just looking up lunchtime, a church to go to at lunchtime, and I had ChatGPT scrape the website of this Anglican or Episcopal church. Jesus was never mentioned on the website once. That's not a church. Liberal churches are not churches if they don't talk about Jesus and the atoning salvation of Jesus. If you want to search, PCA is a great denomination. That was R.C. Sproul and Tim Keller's denomination. You can't go wrong with those two guys. Acts 29, that network has a lot of good churches. Like, try Baptist, try Lutheran, try Presbyterian, try Catholic, try whatever, right? The gospel if you have been saved. Go to a church that preaches the gospel. So the first agreement is you're going to go to church every week. You're not going to sleep in. There's no reason you're missing. You feel bad if you have to go on vacation and miss church. Like, you have to make it that intentional to make it a habit. Second is once you're in that church, you're going to find a small group, a pastor, a couple people that you can just regularly get breakfast with, check in with, have lunch with, to have conversations about where you're at. But mainly you need to get around people that give you an example of where to go. So I host this podcast called Big Hearted Indie. It's a group of guys, Citizen 7, Greg Enos, Don Palmer. Saw them this morning, see them tomorrow morning. And being a part of this group has given me a ton of guys that at my church and in this group that have given me a roadmap on where to get to. They're physically fit. They take care of their wives. They have a lot of savings and investments. They give a lot of money away. They take care of the poor. They have great relationships with their kids. They are role models to look at and say, here's a standard that I need to follow. And then, hey, I'm struggling with this. How'd you get there? How'd you get there in your career? How'd you get there in your spiritual walk? What do you do for reading your Bible? Over the last 2 years, I've gone to lunch with these guys. So what's your prayer life look like? Like, how do you stay so calm all the time? Like, your son is a lawyer. What'd you do when you're raising him? What does family devotional time look like? You have to commit to finding spiritual role models and then learning from them. That's what wisdom is. Wisdom is finding people who are further ahead than you in this lifetime at the values that you care about and doing what they do. The third is reading your Bible every day. You're not going to do that, but you need to commit to it, right? So most people don't do 7 days a week. They're lucky if they get 2 or 3 in. You do it 80% of the time and forgive yourself on that other 20% of the time. But like, the Bible explains who God is. It explains how we are to structure our lives. It explains everything you need to know. Couple resources on that, right? I mentioned the ESV Study Bible. The Bible Project is a website, YouTube channel that has a ton of resources to help you make sense of the larger story. There's also 2 guys that I would mention that I listen to their podcasts a lot. Let me give you 3. R.C. Sproul wrote a lot of great stuff. Tim Keller wrote a lot of great stuff. Both of them wrote Bible studies, lots of books, have podcasts that have they've both died now, but they have podcasts with a bunch of their different preaching. And then a guy who's alive, who's still preaching, who's great at taking these bigger concepts and applying them to our times and to your life, is a guy named Matt Chandler. He's the pastor at the Village Church, and that's a great podcast. I listen to those 3 a lot, as well as Unashamed with Phil Robertson. This one will probably be a little controversial, but it's not if you actually start back at like episode 1 in Spotify and listen straight forward. There's 1,000 episodes or whatever, and he died earlier this year. And I don't really listen to much of the episodes from the last 2 years. But it's a Bible study podcast, and I think he's been super influential for me and another friend. We're like racing to see who can listen to the most of the podcasts. And there's things in there where I'm like, all right, this is a little too social conservative for me. But really, it's just, I don't know, funny and goofy and silly, but also like deep. That's been one that I've really liked. So Village Church, Renewing Your Mind with R.C. Sproul. I like Insight for Living with Chuck Swindoll. And I think it's Gospel for Life with Tim Keller. But just look up Tim Keller. That's his podcast. And then Unashamed. And The Case for Christ. And then that if you're like, really the same stuff applies for like where I was at in 2023, where it's like, I've got these stubborn sins that I've got to work through, as where I was when I was lukewarm. It's just like the level at 2023 was like, you have accountability now. Because if you don't do these things, horrendous things are going to happen to you, to your family. It's going to make everybody's life harder. It's going to, it's not to mention displeasing God. But like, the Christian life is, everybody says, oh, it's not going to be easy. Oh, it's going to be so hard. I find it to be the exact opposite. I don't, it sucks that like, I can't buy as many books as I want, because it's sinful. But it's on the whole a lot better for me. It's good for me to go exercise and treat my body with love and respect. And even if I don't want to, I need my body to be in service to my wife and kids now and for a long time. Like, being married and having kids like really changes your perspective on so much if you're a guy. It's like, I was such a little kid until I had kids. Then you realize, man, I've got to teach values and principles to other kids to make sure that they are successful in life. How, in what ways am I not successful that I need to like get my crap together before they notice? And there's even things like we love chocolate chip cookies and sweets, right? Man, I don't want to program my kids' genetics or program my kids to eat the way that I was programmed to eat. I can't lie and curse and fraud people because these little eyes are watching. It adds a layer of thinking about your own personal values that you really don't have when you're single, because you're just, when you're single, living for your own pleasure and you're not really thinking about legacy as much. But I don't think you can get married until you get your crap together. I'm very blessed that I didn't have kids until I was in my 40s, because I was an emotional wreck, a nut job at 30. I had no business like having any children watch my moral code, my choices, my lifestyle. Like, I would have treated them, I would have been a child talking to children. If you want to stay single, that's fine. But committing to a woman, committing to a family, I wish, I don't know. I never like to tell people what to do. It's part of it. But like, I'm just trying to show you, like, these are the things in my life that have changed my life for the better. I think if you look at me in 2012 when I started this show, 330 pounds, miserable, a wife that didn't love me because I wasn't really doing things that I just wasn't a good husband. I was emotionally immature. I was broke. I didn't have a great job. Like, I had fun at that job, but I didn't have a good job. I didn't have seriousness. I didn't have a lot of different things. And I think if you fast forward like 10 years, almost 15 years now, like the people who knew me in 2012, this like suicidal, depressed, out of control, sick person, physically sick person, to now, that's a pretty great example of what Jesus can do for a person. Like, just saying, I don't know how to do any of this. Help me find some people that can help me do this. Help me, please. And it just started with that prayer. And the day, I think it was like September of 2018, may have been 19, but I think it was 18. Went to Orlando for the NAB radio show with work, with the Bob and Tom show. They said, hey, we'll fly you back on a different day if you want to take an extra day to hang out in Florida. So I did. And I booked like a day in St. Augustine, which is my favorite city on earth. Drove up that Friday, got there around like 6, went in to the Airbnb, changed, then went to the ocean to get in the ocean. And I'm standing in the ocean, and like, nature makes me emotional. Like, I'm man enough to admit this, okay? But there's something about God's creation that just connects with us internally that makes you go, wow, there is something bigger than me. And so I am standing in the ocean, and I'm just sad. I remember like driving through Daytona and like crying. And I remember that whole 24 hours I was in St. Augustine, I was just sad because I was single and felt like I was never going to get married, never going to have kids, depressed, never felt like I was going to not be depressed. And I'm standing in the ocean thinking about this, and there is one of the most beautiful sunsets I've ever seen in my life. It's the Atlantic, so you're looking out at the ocean, and it's getting darker, but behind me, over the condos, was just like this amazing sunset. And so I'm like standing there and like just so moved by the sunset. And I'm thinking, and I just start praying. I'm like, thank you for this beautiful sunset. I wish I could be better. And I just remember like standing there, and I don't remember what I prayed or thought or whatever. This wave just wallops me from behind. I don't know. It was just your dad walks up and just goes in the back of your head for being an idiot. And I remember being hit with this wave and like standing up going, I get it. And the floodgates emotionally just open up. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I know I need to be better. I need to like buckle down, stop living for myself, stop living for all these selfish desires, stop living in a way that I know isn't like I'm embarrassed that I call myself a Christian. I'm acting this way and I'm going to be better from here on out. And I pretty well did my best and do my best since then. It was like that wave just hit me. And it was just this moment of like, I'm listening and I'm here, I'm paying attention, and let's do this. And so I haven't talked about my faith much because I tend to think that if you're going to talk publicly about things, you should know what you're talking about. And even though from 2001 to even today, I've listened to more Christian talk radio than you could shake a stick at, more sermons. Like, I haven't been very deep in my faith until like we got into this church that I go to now, Redeemer in Indy. And if you're local, you're more than welcome to come with us. But like through personal study, I don't really read politics much anymore. I really only read a lot of theological stuff, a lot of Christian stuff. But I haven't talked a lot about it just because I'm like, I don't want to be a Christian influencer and I don't intend to be. Like, I don't intend for this to be a Christian podcast. But I do feel at this particular moment in time that I need to be authentic about this and tell you the truth about these things. Because if I'm going to talk about formation and foundation and what makes a healthy person, what makes a healthy society, I can't deny the change in my life because I'm chasing wisdom and trying to live an ordered life where I'm trying to balance these things in my life, like my spirituality, my physical health, my mental health, my emotional health, my social circles, my work and vocation. Like, just every part of that is soaked with the Bible at this point in my life. But I've been hesitant because I don't want to come across as preachy. But I'm just at a point where I think that's just the wrong approach. Because the more I open up about it, the more questions I get in the DMs. And there is something going on. I started saying this in 2017. Like, I remember in 2017 saying that it was countercultural to be Catholic and countercultural to be Christian. And I started to notice that all the kids that I met at Young Americans for Liberty were also reading like Lee Strobel and listening to Christian podcasts and going to mass. And I was like, there is a difference here between Gen Z and millennials. Because like Citizen 7, I said this to Donna and Greg today, I'm like, this is the first non-church group that I've ever been a part of where you are allowed to just be openly Christian. Like, you can be openly Christian everywhere, but like, you're having conversations about your faith and how that applies to different parts of your life with other men, and like, you're not at church. It's frowned upon at work. It's frowned upon, and I'm not crying oppression. Do not comment that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not oppressed because I'm a white Christian male. I'm just saying, like, the culture has not really wanted to hear from Christians in a while, and I think we've gotten to a place where people feel so spun out, lost, and crazy, like I did in 2018, where you've tried to create your own moral order, and it has failed, that people are now going, how do I find some order? How do I find some security? How do I find some stability? And there are plenty of people who are standing on the sidelines waiting to take advantage of you when you're in that state. And what I always try to push this audience to do is to think for yourself. I listen to this guy who say, yeah, like my priest says not to read the Bible. That may be the priest trying to, if he wants to interpret something that you have access to for you and doesn't want you reading it, like that's a red flag, right? If somebody's telling you can't have a conversation, that's not a good thing. If people are telling you don't want to read the left, or you shouldn't listen to this podcast, or these are people that are trying to control you. And so you should always think for yourself and study for yourself and make your own decisions. I can tell you what works for me. I can tell you what I like. I can tell you, I'm just not going to say God says. I think there's some pretty clear precepts that we'll talk about along the way that are very self-evident, and it's just human nature. But in general, in these conversations, I'm just going to be open with you, and you can take it or leave it. But you're going to hear my story, and I'm going to be honest about it. But I feel like I'm at a point now over the last 6 months where, like, I'm grounded enough to speak from a place of healthiness as opposed to attention seeking. Like, when I got divorced, I kept doing the show, and that was a terrible idea because I was just trying to get attention as a drug and trying to speak from a place of authority, but I was really just trying to hype myself up. Like, I just was miserable and broken, and yeah. So, I don't know, that whole time period makes me think so carefully about what I say in public. And the times make me think that. How I understand after 20 years in media, I have a keen understanding of how people receive information. And obviously, punching you in the face to make you mad gets a response out of you. It's not healthy for you. It's not healthy for me. It's great for the algorithm, which is great for dollars. So it makes sense that you go out and say, yeah, I know that 2 + 2 = 4 on this shooting, but maybe it was the Jews, right? Because that's different information than everybody else is talking about, and that gets great for hits, right? Never going to do that. Never going to try to do that, but I will be honest with you. So I hope this was a little helpful. I feel like I'm just rambling as much longer than I thought it was going to be. But just to summarize, make the decision. Make the decision that you're going to live more faithfully. Make the decision for Christ if you haven't made the decision. Live more faithfully if you've made that decision. Go to a church, commit to a group, commit to friends, and commit to yourself that you're going to do these things and seek out what God has in store for you, because it's so much better than what you've planned for yourself. And like, my life is a testament to that. All right, thanks for listening. I hope that this wasn't just self-indulgent and that it was helpful. All right, thanks. We'll talk to you soon.